Well, hello and welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith, and how are you all today? I'm going to talk today about carry guns. Now, usually I keep these over on Patreon because when you talk about carry guns on YouTube, it just brings a whole lot of incoming idiocy from people who have gotten all of their information out of magazines and somebody at a gun counter, and it muddies the waters of the truth that we try to get out here. But I think this is of sufficient interest to people, and the question came, I'm going to read a question, it's a long question. I think it's of sufficient interest, and it comes from a good friend of mine and a patron that will illustrate a lot of the important questions and my answers concerning carry guns. So we're going to get into that in a second. A little bit about me. Why do I think that I can give you an opinion on this for those of you who haven't heard me talk about guns before or don't know me, just stumbled on this channel because of the title. I'm a former police officer, deputy sheriff. I've carried a gun for 48 years now. I had experience in patrol and fugitive apprehension, undercover narcotics, undercover organized crime, and it was really the undercover years that taught me a lot about carrying. Oh, by the way, I should say that this is brought to you. I'm going to be reading the question that I wrote down in the Stonemont notebook, if you don't know what that is. And if you don't know about my books, I always let everybody know that this and every video is brought to you by the Stonemont series, my books, about the total guide in novel form, 6 novels so far in a series about how to prepare for, survive, and rebuild after a total collapse. People around the world tell me that this is the best series of books they have ever read on the subject, including many from emergency services, military, other preparedness instructors and things like that. If you haven't read them and you truly are interested in preparedness, and if you haven't read them, you should. They're available on Amazon in paperback or Kindle or through me. And the way to get them is down below. The links to the Amazon is down there, and you can get autographed copies from me by sending the indicated amount to the address below. It's down there in the information section, and I usually remember to pin a comment regarding it. So that is the sponsor for this, regardless of who else puts on ads on this. And for people who buy the entire series from me, I throw in a copy of the Stonemont notebook for free. And you can't do that through Amazon. You have to do it through me. So there you have it. Now, getting back to the question. There are a lot of opinions out there about carry guns, and it gets into calibers and how to carry, all sorts. Everybody's got an opinion. The sad thing is that most of the opinions that are shared on venues like YouTube don't come from experience. They come, like I said, from magazines and such. And so I want to address this because there's a lot of misleading information out there. And when theory meets reality, reality always wins. I say that training is great. Training is better than no training, and usually more training is better than less training. It depends. There's not all training is good out there. So more bad training is not better than less good training. But training isn't the real teacher. Experience is. When reality arrives on the scene, it's the test of your training, and then the reality is the teacher from then on. You learn a lot from there. So let's look into this, and I welcome comments. I welcome comments from those with experience. I welcome questions from those without experience, although the questions are better directed over on the Patreon channel. I don't always have time to answer questions to people's satisfaction on the YouTube channel. And so if you're not with us on Patreon, it's only $1 a month. The link's down below. Come on over. You'll be glad you did. You'll get a lot of information over there that you don't get on YouTube. So I do welcome, like I say, I welcome comments from those with experience. And I can tell because, well, I can tell. And I welcome question for those without experience. And what I do not welcome are people who simply come on and say stupid things like, well, I'll stick with my such and such. Okay. First off, that's not helpful. Secondly, this is not your venue to try to teach people, nor is anybody impressed with your opinion on what you'll just stick with, regardless of what I say. Now, have I offended enough people? Hopefully, we've gotten rid of those people who are just, not going to add to the discussion. So I want to read this question. And this is such a great question. It comes from a very good friend of mine, my best buddy, also a very important member of our group, who has a lot of experience in firearms. But he has experience with semi-autos because, for those of you who, I would say maybe 50s and under, don't have a lot of experience with revolvers. And I've just recently introduced him to revolvers, and he is loving them. He bought a new Smith 686, which for those of you who may not be familiar, because I know that there's, most of the younger guys are auto guys. It's a Smith & Wesson stainless steel 357 Magnum. He got his in a 3-inch barrel, which I highly recommend, and it's a 7-shot. So anyway, so he's just now getting into revolvers. He's looking at getting another one. He really loves revolvers once I explained it. And he shot my Model 57 41 Magnum recently over at the range and loved that. So now he's looking for either a Model 57 or a Model 29, which is the 44. Same gun, basically. 41 Magnum, this is for those of you who don't know. The difference between a 41 and a 44 Magnum, is that a 41 Magnum is a true 41 caliber. A 44 Magnum is not a true 44. It's a .429 caliber. And they're on the same frame, they're the same size, they're the same gun. It's a slightly different caliber. But the 41 shoots a little bit faster and flatter. So most of you didn't care about that, but now you know anyway, don't you? Okay, so that's the background. He's just getting into revolvers. He says, that looks really nice. Yeah, he had asked me about looking for a smaller revolver to carry, and I suggested to him a Smith & Wesson Model 60, which is a 357 Magnum. It's on a smaller frame than the 686, but it's only a 5-shot. Now, to give you maybe some background, I should have given you more background on this. When I was in Undercover, I carried multiple guns. My primary gun was a 1911 and 45. It was a Colt Combat Commander. I had carried that as a backup when I was in uniform. We were required to carry revolvers at that time. It was the old Smith & Wesson Model 15 Combat Masterpiece. Before that, I had initially trained on the Model 10, but we moved up to Model 15s. And but on the department I was with, they didn't really make a big issue if you also wanted to carry additional guns of your own. And I always did. I always carried that 45 1911 as a backup. And I've told stories about that, how I carried it and everything over on Patreon. And then when I got undercover and my first year and a half, I worked mainly the motorcycle clubs, the motorcycle gangs, and the harder we rode chopped Harleys, and so you can understand the type of people that we were dealing with, some very hardcore people. And so I decided that one gun wasn't enough, because it wasn't like we could call backup. We carried one gun, no reloads, and it was, we didn't have radios, things like we were riding Harleys. And if we got in a problem, which we did, and I've told that story, a couple of those stories over on Patreon, we didn't have any backup. We were our backup. And if you only had the 8 that you carried in your combat masterpiece and 8 wasn't enough, you're out of luck. So I thought, well, it's time to carry it a little bit more. At that time, shortly before that, the movie had come out about Frank Serpico, the New York City narc, and I'd read the book, and he kind of is what brought the 9mm to the public's attention. And he had carried, I think he carried the Browning high power. We had an FN high power in our gun room. We had all sorts of guns in our gun room in the undercover unit, a lot of them without serial numbers. And the funny thing, way back then, and things have changed now, way back then, this is in the late 70s, you could just go into the gun room and take anything you wanted. You didn't have to check it out. You didn't have to sign it out. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. And I think I was the only dummy that actually turned everything back in when I left. Yeah, it shows you. I was, yeah, okay. I wanted to be honest, right? But anyway, so I went back in the gun room and I saw this. We had a FN high power, which carried 14 9mm. I wasn't real thrilled about the 9mm. It was fairly, it was a small round. Not like my 45 that I felt very comfortable with, but it carried a lot, right? So 14, one on the pipe, so I've got 15. So then, and I found myself in a couple of situations that I found myself sitting down, and I carried those. I always carried the 45, the 1911 over here at about 8:30. Okay. Butt forward, because it's easier to access in a variety of ways. And then I shoved that other one. And a lot of people, this seems backwards to a lot of people. I don't, do it how's right for you. It doesn't matter. Whatever is right for you. I have my reasons. You have your reasons. So I carried that at about 4 o'clock back here, also butt forward. That FN high power. So then at one time I found myself several times that made me believe, well, if I'm sitting down, if I'm sitting in a place, if I'm sitting on a couch, if I'm sitting, wherever in a chair, I might not be able to get to those, for whatever reasons. And this is simply, I can't explain it all. If there's any undercovers out there, you know what I'm talking about. I said, well, I need one that I can reach if I'm sitting down and my hands are hanging down in front of me. So I started putting a 38 snub nose and just dropping it into my boot. No holster. You'll notice that none of these, none of them had holsters. We didn't wear holsters because a holster would give you away as a cop, right? I mean, outlaws don't use holsters. And these were just shoved down in our pants. And so I just started dropping a 2-inch down my left boot, and then a knife in my right boot. So that just kind of gives you maybe a little background on that. So when I showed him this, he's looking for a smaller gun, and I suggested the Smith & Wesson Chief Model 60. It's in stainless. It's a 357 on a smaller frame, carries 5 rounds. So he says, here starts his question. That looks really nice size-wise. I bet it handles 38 Special really well. Yes, right. I don't know if that's a good carry round or not. So let's address that one first, because we're going as a 38 Special. Yeah, it's a decent carry round. It's I prefer it to a 9mm. The 9mm guys will not, but that's just because of a number of things. It's a decent round. I mean, cops carried 38 Specials since, the 1900s. It's killed a lot of people. It's put a lot of people down. Is it a hard thumper like a 45? No, it's not. The bigger the hole, the more damage. It just gets down to that. And don't fall prey to all this stuff about special defense rounds and things like that. I wouldn't bet my life on an expanding round. I like a nice big round. You know the old saying that a small round may get bigger, but a big round never gets smaller. Advice to live by. So yeah, 38 special is a decent round. It's not one that I would want to carry as a primary, but as a background, as a backup. I carried it as my second backup, not my first backup. You know, which was a 9mm, but I had a lot of them. You know, if you carry a small round, you better have a lot of them. So he says it's a good carry. Is 38 special a good carry round? I wouldn't carry it as my primary, as a backup. Yeah. He says, he goes on, but I feel like it's shooting a 22 in my 686. What he means there is when he shoots the 357 Magnum out of his 686, you can feel it's a Magnum. You put 38 in there, and it's like shooting a 22. I mean, there's that much less power in a 38 than in a 357 Magnum. And my opinion has always been a 357 is one of the best calibers going. And a 357 Revolver is a good frame because it will handle either 357 or 38. You know, it's the same caliber. Different round. So he says, I was just thinking a revolver for a backup in a pocket or a boot would be good. Yes, it is. A 38 in a pocket, and I've carried a lot of times in a pocket. Now, most people, you know, choose to put a pocket holster, put them in a pocket holster and put them in your pocket. I never have. This is where training and stuff like that is different than reality. Okay? I've dropped a lot of just a lot of times I've just dropped a pistol in my pocket. Now, you can't really do it with jeans, you know, but I you know, when I'm wearing pants with larger pockets, heck, I've carried a full size in a pocket, and the pocket just has to be deep enough. But I don't carry them in a holster. And you know, a lot has been made about the importance of holsters. Well, you know, holster manufacturers sure want you to think so, and anybody who's training, sure, you know, training you to wear holsters will say this. I'll just say again, I came from a background of reality, carried for 48 years now. There's a lot of times I don't use a holster. Oh, well, then you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I do. So yeah, a small revolver in your pocket or your boot is a great backup. He says, of course, he's got his Kimber 45, which is nice, and it's a smooth shooter. I mean, you know, the Kimber is, a lot of times I didn't push Kimber because they were overpriced. It's kind of the same reason that I never pushed Glock, because they were just overpriced. They're good guns, but, you know, I didn't see any reason to spend $200-300 more than I could get another good gun for. But I've shot his Kimber, and it's sweet. It's nice and smooth. Shoots a little bit smoother than my Springfield Armory, which is my primary 1911, or my TSOSH, and which I love. The Kimber shoots a little smoother. You know, if you're cranking out, you know, several hundred rounds a day at the range, that's going to be important. In a self-defense situation, you're never going to notice it. You're never going to notice it. There's a whole lot of things you don't notice, and I'll throw this in right here for people who want to peek into reality. There are the things that you won't notice in a shooting situation, in a self-defense shooting situation, are number one, your sights. I know that's going to butt hurt so many people that just acquire your sights and put your front sight on. You know, when somebody is pointing a gun at you and you see the flash in your direction, the last thing you're going to be looking at is your sights. You're going to be looking at the flash. You're going to be looking at them. That's why I'm a big promoter, and I train a lot of point shooting, intuitive shooting. It's damn near just as accurate as using your sights, and a lot more if in a defense shooting, because of a whole variety of, if you can't point shoot, you're not ready for for a defensive shooting situation. Another thing you won't notice is your trigger reset. I know I watched some videos, and I'm hearing all about, when people do reviews of a new pistol, and some, that's another thing. So, well, there's pistols and there's revolvers. No, they're all pistols. Okay. Here's another thing that magazine ninjas, like to jump up and down about. A pistol is an auto loader and a revolver is a revolver. Pistol comes from the old pistola, the old Spanish meaning a handheld firearm. Okay, the pistoleros were not carrying Glocks. Okay. So this is one of those recent, don't mean anything disagreements that has popped up that for people who want to act like they know all about what they're talking about, and they don't. Who's calling me? I don't know. I'll get back to them. So like I said, there's some things you're not going to notice. You're not going to notice your sights. You're not going to notice your pistol reset. So you just keep pulling that trigger, right? That's what you do in a crisis situation. Well, but if you went, I got this great idiotic comment not long ago when I was comparing 9mm to, and this guy came on and he says, well, but if it's good enough, but CAG has carries this, and SMU carries this, and DevGru carries. He named off all of the units, all the Tier 1 units by their cool names, which people don't do that. Just to give you a hint. And he went all through about it, FBI and this and that, and they all went to the 9mm, and they did that because they were hiring weenie people, and as far as the military go, who couldn't handle anything bigger than a 9, and as far as the military, those things are too often chosen politically and through procurement departments, many of whom aren't on the ground. And you'd be surprised what the guys would like to carry when they can carry their own stuff. So yeah, you're not going to, all this deal about trigger reset, you're not going to notice that. Pull the trigger again, keep on pulling that trigger, make it go bang bang until the situation is ended. Okay. You're not going to notice the recoil. You're never going to notice the recoil between a 9mm and a 40. In a self-defense situation. Never going to notice it. And you're never going to notice whether your Kimber is smoother than your Springfield Armory in a self-defense shooting situation. Simply not going to happen. So these are non-issues that people I know like to talk about, but they like to talk about it because they don't have experience to talk about. And so I guess everybody needs something to talk about. Would you recommend carrying a large capacity semi-auto as a second gun to your primary revolver or 1911? That's what it all comes down to. That's the best question in here. Yes, because that's exactly what I did, okay? I relied on a big caliber. My primary was a 1911 45. But the reason that I carried a high capacity semi-auto in that FN high power was because I knew that if I wasn't able to solve the problem with 8 big rounds, I needed as many more rounds as possible. Okay, I may not be taking them out as quickly with a smaller round, but at least I'd have a lot more. And usually in that situation, it's because you had multiple attackers. Okay, simple as that. And back in my day, we didn't carry reloads. Now some of the, of course, in uniform, when we were in uniform, we wore dump pouches, what were called dump pouches on our belts. Very few of the guys carried speed loaders. I don't know of anybody who did. Simply because of the mechanics. In a situation when you're needing to speedily reload, hopefully you're not standing out in the middle of the street, bang, 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 and then, uh-oh, I'm out, clack, 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 speed loader. I mean, the first rule of gunfighting, in the Smith rule of gunfighting, is get behind something that a bullet won't go through. I love saying things non-tactically. People will say, get behind cover. I'm not like it. Get behind something that a bullet won't go through. Simple as that. And I don't mean your partner. Okay. And you shouldn't be standing out in the middle of the street. Well, I won't get into that. Almost talked about a personal situation that I don't think I will. Don't stand out in the middle of the street in a gunfight. Now, sometimes I know that you're out there, but if you run dry, you don't want to just stand there while you reload. You want to either be getting behind something or moving so that you're, a less accessible target. So that's why I carried a higher capacity semi-auto. And I think that's good. I think that the higher powered, not meaning the high power that I carried, a higher powered or a higher destructive round is best for your primary weapon. And I would include in that 45 ACP, 357 Magnum, and 10 millimeter. Okay, those are your truly effective rounds, with our next step down being 40, which is still a very effective round. And then on the lower tier, 9 millimeter and 38. And then below that, anybody that wants to go down to the 380, 22, things like that. And I know I always get people coming on, but it's better than nothing. And then I'll also get the people, but it's shot placement that's so important. I had a guy come on and was trying to convince me of how effective a 22 was, and he made the statement, you were just a cop. I'm a veteran. Well, buddy, you would be surprised at how little that impresses me. I don't come on here to purposely offend people, but I just get tired of the idiocy. I used to love how James Yeager, I miss James Yeager, a guy who actually knew what he was talking about. I used to love listening to him slam the people that came on with stupid comments. I want to do that so often, but I hold myself back. So yeah, so those are the top tier effective rounds are 45 ACP, 357 Magnum, and 10 millimeter. Now, I mean, 44 Magnum, 41 Magnum, yeah, those are the granddaddies, but most people aren't going to carry those, okay? And then just a step down from those would be the 40s, and then the step down that I know that the 10 millimeter guys like to call 40 short and weak, because it's Smith & Wesson. And then underneath that, the 9 millimeter and the 38. And below that, I mean, only carry those if you need to carry them in your underwear or something. I don't know. I know that a lot of people that have to wear scrubs, they need to be able to hide them because they have rules against carrying weapons where they work. If all you can hide is a 380, okay. But they're certainly not, a prime choice. So we'll finish up this question. Would you recommend carrying a large capacity semi-auto as a second gun to your primary revolver or 1911? Yes. Or alternately, would carrying two revolvers be stupid? I don't think that carrying revolvers is ever stupid. And I'll say something right here that that is, again, going to get some people all wound up, get their panties in a bunch. Revolvers are simply more dependable than autos. And now somebody's I've never had a trouble with my Glock or M&P, whatever. I don't mean to pick on Glock, but I've never had. Well, I'll tell you what. I've never had a 1911 jam, but I mean, keep them lubed and ready to go. I have had striker fires jam. Yes, I have. I have had striker, and pretty much everybody has. Anybody who's done it enough will tell you, you're going to have jams and striker fires. It could be for any number of reasons. It could be bad ammo. It could be bad, a magazine problem. You could have a problem, a failure to feed, a failure to eject, all these things. Semi-autos are simply more prone to problems than are revolvers. Revolvers, yeah, something can happen to a revolver, but for the most part, revolvers are much more dependable than autos. And if you're in a life and death situation, you don't want that situation to be the one where you find out that, oh, a semi-auto will jam. Okay. So yeah, and I've always, like I've said in the past, I usually never carried reloads. I always carried more guns. It's just easier if you run dry with one instead of going through the whole process. And yes, I know how fast Jerry Michalak can reload. You know, you're not Jerry, unless Jerry's watching. Now, Jerry, if you're watching, you are, okay? But most of you aren't Jerry Michalak, and neither am I. And the thing about if you are really needing to reload quickly, I don't care whether it's a revolver, which is slower than an auto, you know, usually, or it's a semi-auto. When you're in a high-stress situation, and I don't mean going through the training. I went through training that put us in stressful situations to where we reloaded and now we're ready to go and I'm Rambo. No. What I mean, did you go to the training where the guy was shooting at you with live ammo? Actually trying to hit you? No, because nobody does that, all right? Okay. So let's put that dog to bed. You have not been, you would be surprised. I don't care how much you train, that if it comes to somebody shooting at you from, you got to realize what most pistol self-defense shootings are, and they are within about 20, 25 feet because they're close up outside or they're within a building, within a room. So yeah, so it's usually easier rather than running dry and all of a sudden, you know, reaching for your speed loader or reaching for your magazine and dropping the magazine and come. I don't care how fast you can do it in training to show off. When somebody's shooting at you, you're going to slow down, or you're going to drop the mag, or you're going to miss the mag well. Okay, or maybe when you hit the mag, it's not going to come out all the way first. All sorts of things can happen in those kinds of situations. So much easier just to pull another gun. So much easier. Okay, so yeah, I don't think that at all that 2 revolvers. I think that's great. You know, if you've got your first revolver that carries 7, your 686 plus carries 7, and you have a backup, even the Model 60 that carries 5. By the time you have gone through 12 rounds, you ought to be behind something. Hey, buddy, you ought to be behind something that you can now reload. Okay, and with revolvers, I do suggest, you know, carrying a couple of speed loaders with you. Although most defensive shooting situations are taken care of far below 12 rounds. Okay? And we've all heard the 3, 3, and 3, right? Most defensive uses of handguns are within 3 yards, 3 seconds, 3 shots. Okay, there's some disagreement about where they got those numbers, but yeah, you know, I don't think it's too far off. I don't think it's too far off with the shooting